At 2 in the morning, I pressed my palm flat against the wall between our apartments and listened to a man I had never met fall apart on the other side of it. I didn't call out. I didn't knock. I just stayed there in the dark in my t-shirt and static charged hair like my hand alone could hold him together. I should probably start earlier than that. My name is Alina. I'm 26, I make ceramics that mostly don't sell. And 6 months ago I traded a 2-bedroom apartment full of furniture that used to be ours for a 500-square-foot studio in a 100-year-old building called Maple House. I told my sister it was because the light was good. Really, it was because staying in that old apartment with Daniel's coffee table and Daniel's bookshelves and none of Daniel felt like living in a museum dedicated to my own bad judgment. Maple House has charm if you're the kind of person who romanticizes exposed pipes and radiators that clank like a haunted house at 3 a.m. What it does not have is soundproofing. The walls are plaster over lath, original to whenever this city still had streetcars and they let through everything: footsteps, sneezes. The particular sigh a person makes when they've had a long day and think no one's listening. For the first month, my neighbor in 4A was just a set of sounds. I knew he ground his coffee beans at 6:10 every morning, always the same 3 pulses of the grinder, like even his coffee had rhythm. I knew he showered for exactly 6 minutes. I timed it once, out of nothing better to do with my Tuesday night. I knew he had a laugh that started low and private before it broke open into something real, the kind of laugh you feel land in your own chest even through a wall. I didn't know his name. I'd never seen his face. I only knew him the way you know weather, as something that happened around you that you adjusted your life to without quite noticing. This is the story of how that wall, the one I complained about to literally everyone who'd listen, became the reason I fell in love. It started, if I'm honest, with a fight. Not between us, we hadn't met yet, but between me and a piece of furniture at midnight on a Thursday. I heard it before I understood it, a dragging sound, low and heavy, followed by a thud that rattled the picture frame above my bed, then another. Then the unmistakable scrape of something enormous being repositioned 3 inches to the left, and then, God help me, 3 inches back to the right. "Are you kidding me?" I said out loud to no one at 12:47 a.m. I banged twice on the wall with the side of my fist. Not gently, everything went silent. I lay there in the dark feeling a little guilty and a little smug, and then 2 soft knocks back, not defensive, almost sheepish, like an apology in Morse code. I didn't think much of it that night. I was tired and mad, and Daniel-shaped resentment was still doing most of the emotional heavy lifting in my life. But the next morning, the coffee grinder went off at 6:10 like always, 3 careful pulses, and I found myself smiling into my pillow before I'd even opened my eyes. Over the next few weeks, without either of us saying a word, we built a language. 2 knocks meant sorry. 1 knock, if his music got too loud after 11, meant turn it down, and it always went down within seconds, like he'd been waiting for the cue. Some nights he played guitar, badly, earnestly, the same 4 chords looping like he was circling something he couldn't quite land on, and I stopped minding. I started listening on purpose, lying on my side with my ear an inch from the plaster, embarrassed at myself and doing it anyway. Once, I heard him burn something. A smoke alarm went off, muffled through the wall, followed by a string of muttered swearing and a window being thrown open. I laughed so hard I had to put my face in a pillow so he wouldn't hear me laughing at his disaster. The next evening there was a paper coffee cup sitting outside my door, no note. Just sitting there, still warm, my order somehow: oat milk, 1 sugar, which meant he'd noticed the same barista at the corner place noticing us both, or he'd simply guessed right. Or maybe I'd said it out loud on the phone once without thinking about the wall. I left the empty cup outside his door the next morning with a napkin tucked into it. On the napkin, I'd written, "Sorry about the fist thing, 2 knocks, sorry." Then faintly that laugh, the real one, low and warm, right through the plaster. My best friend Priya came over for wine that Friday and caught me mid-eavesdrop, ear practically against the plaster, and did not let me live it down. "You're telling me," she said, refilling her glass, "that you have a whole relationship with a man whose face you have never seen. It's not a relationship. You know his coffee order habits. You know his shower length. Alina, I don't know my own boyfriend's shower length. It's not I didn't have a good end to that sentence, so I didn't finish it. Just knock on the door," she said. Actual door, actual knuckles, and say what? "Hi, I've been listening to you live your life for a month. Want to get dinner?" Priya just looked at me over the rim of her glass, the particular look she'd been giving me since college. The one that meant she already knew I wasn't ready to hear the obvious thing yet. She didn't push it. She just topped off my wine and changed the subject to her boyfriend's terrible taste in furniture, and I was grateful, and I thought about knocking on his door for the rest of the night anyway. I want to be clear that for a long time I didn't think this was going anywhere. It felt more like, I don't know, like keeping a plant alive. A small, private thing that made the apartment feel less like a box I was serving a sentence in. We almost met twice. The first time I was hauling 2 bags of groceries up the stairwell and a man was coming down, hood up, headphones in, eyes on his phone. We did that awkward hallway shuffle where you both stepped the same direction twice, and he mumbled sorry without looking up, and I mumbled it back, and it wasn't until I was inside my own apartment, key still in the lock, that I heard 4A's door open and close and thought, that might have been him. The second time I was leaving for work and heard his door open right as mine did. I panicked, genuinely panicked, like a woman who had never spoken to a man before in her life, and ducked back inside pretending I'd forgotten something. And stood there with my back against my own door, heart going, feeling like an idiot, until I heard his footsteps go the other way down the hall. I didn't tell him about either almost meeting, not with words, but that night I tapped a different pattern on the wall, 3 quick knocks, then 1 slow one, nothing that meant anything yet. Just something, an invented word in a language we were making up as we went. 3 quick, 1 slow, came back an hour later, right before I fell asleep. I lay there afterward turning it over, the way you turn over a stone in your pocket without meaning to. It should have felt strange, this thing we were building, a courtship conducted entirely in knuckles and silence, 2 people who'd never traded a single sentence out loud, but it didn't feel strange. It felt like the safest thing I'd let myself want in a year. With Daniel, I'd learned to brace before I even opened my mouth, to measure every sentence for how much space it was allowed to take up. With the wall, there was no bracing, just knock and answer, and the quiet, generous certainty that whoever was on the other side wanted to hear from me at all. I didn't say any of that to Priya. I barely let myself say it to the dark of my own room. But I started falling asleep most nights with my hand resting near the plaster, just in case, the way you leave a porch light on for someone you're hoping will find their way home. There was a Tuesday in October I still think about. It had rained all day, the kind of gray, bone-deep rain that makes the whole city feel like it's holding its breath, and I'd had one of those days where nothing goes wrong exactly. But everything feels heavy anyway, the kind of day where you catch your own reflection in a dark window and don't recognize how tired you look. Around 10, he started playing guitar, not the looping, unfinished thing he usually played, something slower. Something with an actual melody, fumbled in places, restarted twice, but real, aching almost. I lay on my bed with my hand flat against the wall, like I could feel the notes traveling through the plaster into my palm, and I cried a little. For reasons that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the last 6 months of my life finally catching up to me. When the song ended, I tapped slow 3 beats, a pause, 2 beats. Good night in whatever language this was, slow 3, pause 2, right back. I fell asleep with my hand still against the wall. It was 3 weeks later that I heard him break. I woke up to it, not to a sound exactly, but to the absence of the usual ones, no coffee grinder, no footsteps. Just a silence so complete it felt like its own kind of noise, stretching from somewhere past midnight into the small, raw hours of the morning. And then quiet at first, almost swallowed by the wall itself, crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old, not new hurt crying, but a wound reopening on schedule like it kept its own calendar. I heard him pick up his phone. Heard the low murmur of a one-sided conversation, half words bleeding through plaster. I know it's been 3 years. I just keep thinking he'd be 31 this year, you know. 31, I lay there in the dark, not moving, hand pressed flat against the wall without deciding to put it there. Suddenly, every sound I'd catalogued over 2 months rearranged itself in my head. The guitar he played badly, 4 chords looping like he couldn't finish something. The way some nights were louder and some nights were nothing at all, no pattern to it that I'd ever been able to guess. The song that Tuesday in October fumbled and restarted, not clumsy, grieving. I didn't knock 2 beats or 3 or any beat at all. There was no code for this. So I just stayed there, palm against the wall in the dark on my side of a 100-year-old barrier, and let him not be alone, even if he never knew I was there. At 2 in the morning, I pressed my palm flat against the wall between our apartments and listened to a man I had never met fall apart on the other side of it. I didn't call out. I didn't knock. I just stayed there like my hand alone could hold him together. The next evening, I stood in front of his actual door for the first time in 2 months of knowing him completely and not at all. I'd made him a mug. It sounds small, written down like that, but ceramics is the one place I say things I can't say out loud, and I'd spent 4 hours on it after work, a deep matte blue. A little crooked at the handle because my hands weren't steady. I stood in the hallway holding it like an idiot for almost a full minute before I made myself knock. The door opened, and there he was. He was taller than I'd built him in my head, dark hair pushed back like he'd been running his hands through it, eyes red-rimmed in a way he clearly wasn't expecting anyone to see. For a second neither of us said anything, then something shifted in his face, recognition not of my features but of something else. "You're the 2 knocks," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You're the 6-minute shower," I said back, and he laughed, that real laugh, low and private, except this time I wasn't hearing it through plaster. I was standing close enough to watch it happen. His name was Jonah. I found that out standing in his doorway holding a crooked blue mug I suddenly felt too shy to actually give him. He asked me in any way. His apartment was the mirror image of mine, same bones, different life, a guitar in the corner that I recognized instantly, case open, strings still humming faintly from earlier. I set the mug down on his counter without quite explaining why I'd made it, and he looked at it for a long moment before he looked back at me. "That guitar," I said, careful, "it's not yours, is it?" "Not originally." He didn't ask how I knew there was a difference. He just sat down at his kitchen table like his legs had decided for him, and told me about his brother Sam, 3 years older, reckless in the specific, lovable way older brothers are. Gone in a highway accident on a Tuesday in October that Jonah still, 3 years later, hadn't figured out how to survive without flinching. The guitar had been Sam's. Jonah didn't really play. He was learning badly on purpose because it felt like the only way to keep a conversation going with someone who couldn't answer anymore. I told him about Daniel, not the highlight reel, the real version, the 2 years of shrinking myself smaller and smaller until I fit into a life that was never actually mine. I told him about the museum apartment and how Maple House was supposed to be a fresh start that mostly just felt like starting over alone. "I used to think the wall was the worst part of this place," I said. "Everyone can hear everything, no privacy at all. And now?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked, the way you can't through 8 inches of plaster, and something in my chest went very quiet and very sure. "Now I think it's the only reason I know you at all." He crossed the small kitchen in maybe 4 steps. I remember the sound of his chair scraping back, sharper than anything that had ever come through the wall, and then his hand was at my jaw, gentle. Asking a question his mouth hadn't caught up to yet. I answered before he finished asking. What happened after that is between the 2 of us and that kitchen and the guitar that had finally, quietly, found something worth playing for. I'll just say the light outside had gone fully dark by the time either of us said another word, and neither of us minded. That was 8 months ago. We still have 2 apartments. People ask us why now that things are what they are, and I never quite know how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound sentimental to the point of embarrassing. But Jonah gets it without me saying anything. Because Jonah always seems to get the things that matter most without me having to spell them out. Maybe that's just what happens when you fall for someone through a wall before you ever fall for their face. We kept the wall on purpose. Some nights we still tap 2 knocks for goodnight, 3 quick and 1 slow for I'm thinking about you. It's silly, probably. Frank, the building super, thinks we're both a little strange, 2 grown adults maintaining separate leases 40 feet from each other's kitchens. He offered once, half-joking, to knock the wall through and make it one big unit. We both said no so fast he laughed for a week. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about walls. Sometimes the space between 2 people isn't a barrier at all. Sometimes it's just the place where you learn someone's real shape before you ever see their face, their patience, their grief, their bad guitar Tuesdays. The particular sound of their laugh when it stops performing and just happens. Sometimes the wall isn't what's keeping you apart, it's what taught you how to listen. The guitar sits in his apartment still, better cared for now, actually tuned. He plays Sam's favorite song on the anniversary every year, and this past October I sat on his kitchen floor next to him while he played it, and when he faltered halfway through, I didn't fill the silence. I just put my hand over his on the fretboard the same way I once put my palm against a wall and let him find his own way back to the note. The wall between our apartments is still there. 8 inches of 100-year-old plaster, same as it ever was. It just got a lot thinner every night until one day it wasn't really a wall between us at all. It was just the place our story started. Thank you so much for listening to this one. If it made you feel something, that's really the whole reason I tell these stories, so it means more than you know that you stuck around till the end. If you liked this, come back for more. I've got a whole channel of stories just like it, and following along means you'll never miss the next one. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Has anything like this ever happened to you? A neighbor, a stranger through a wall, someone you fell for before you even knew their name, or maybe you've watched it happen to someone close to you. I'd love to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one.